Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Gym Class All-Stars. We here at our wonderful podcast have been treated to, would you say, the best offseason of all time, even better than last year's?
Last year was crazy just because of so many stars switching teams. I think it was something like 50% of the league switched teams. It was ridiculous. But this year has been about it's been about the role players, the integral cogs of the team. So I'm going to say yes, because teams haven't dramatically changed this offseason, but the inner workings of them have completely flipped, and that makes for a better offseason in my mind. So maybe not the best of all time, but we're getting it. We're certainly in that direction.
While we haven't seen a whole lot of stars moved, there has been a lot of signings, a lot of drama, and a lot of pick hoarding from OKC. But we came to expect the last one. We might as well start it off with the draft. Want to get into that, Robby?
I do indeed. So here at Gym Class All-Stars, we attempted to project not just the top 10. I also tried to project the entire first round. And a lot of the players, we had correctly, but in the positions, not so much. So first, second, third was going to be a kind of hot topic of debate for this draft. Nobody quite knew what Minnesota was going to do with that pick and then who they were going to take if they didn't end up moving it. But the order of 1, 2, 3 went Anthony Edwards was the number 1 overall pick, went to Minnesota. They did not trade the pick. There was then talk that Golden State might have traded down in a trade to Chicago. They did not. They stuck with James Wiseman, who I heard was at the top of their draft board the entire time. No matter what pick they had, they were going to take James Wiseman if he was available. And then LaMelo Ball went to Michael Jordan's Hornets at number 3, I assume as, the attempt to make him the franchise piece starts to ramp up. But that was 1, 2, 3. That was the order that the top 3 guys went in. I was able to predict that correctly, and then literally just one other pick for the rest of the first round, but we'll get to that. But so those guys, I think, are all going to fit well in their teams. Edwards, they just need a guy to, be the physical piece. Wiseman, they needed a center, and Ball, the Hornets just needed to start building around. So I like that. But the big surprise of the night was number 4, was the Chicago Bulls. Oh man, did it feel good to live near a bunch of Bulls fans for this. Patrick Williams of Florida State, 6'8", the only player in college basketball to average an assist, a steal, and a block. And that was probably the only positive thing mentioned about him on draft night, as he didn't start a single game in his college career. And the Bulls decided that was good enough for the number 4 overall pick. Body-wise, he fits the NBA, but can you see why they picked him in any way?
They needed a small forward, which, they have Levine, they have the GOAT, Thomas Satoransky, they have Markkanen, they have Wendell Carter. They have a lot of that depth at forward. They really just needed a small forward. So he fits that role. My only gripe is I think he would have fell past at least 15, if not later. So if he's really the guy, he's going to be that cornerstone, okay, fine. Take him while you got the chance. But I really think you could have traded down to get him. And that's kind of why I thought personally that they're going to take good old Danny from good old Israel. I thought they'd take him because he fits that role pretty well. I mean, maybe he's more ball dominant, but I don't know. I'm a little confused with that pick, but we really got to wait and see with that one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I had Denny going 4. I also could have seen them picking Isaac Okoro, who I believe is the best defensive player in the draft. But alas, they take Patrick Williams, the 4th overall pick. We'll see what he can do. I would assume he's still projected to be the starter. They did just bring back Denzel Valentine for the last year of his contract. But other than that, and Otto Porter. But we'll see
Otto Porter, don't they?
Yeah, that's kind of a mess right there. So it's at least an opportunity for maybe Williams to get his first start in a little while. So we'll see how that goes for Chicago. Cleveland and Atlanta had the next 2 picks. They took Isaac Okoro and Onyeka Okongwu. And I wanted to single this out because I believe they're the 2 biggest winners of this draft based off those 2 players. Okongwu, I have made very clear, is my favorite player in this draft. I believe he is going to be the best player in this draft unless James Wiseman ascends to superstar level. But Okoro, as I just mentioned, the best defensive player in the draft, exactly what Cleveland needed, a guy that can just hunker down and guard somebody. And in Atlanta, they now have their modern basketball center, their 6'9" hybrid shot blocking, rim running big man. I love both those acquisitions for those teams. I think 5 and 6 were great picks for those guys. Also, I think we all kind of knew after top 3 is when the draft was going to get really exciting. And for me, it happened right away after that. So big shout out to those guys. Denny, as you mentioned, as a guy that we had going a little earlier, fell. He fell far.
Fell. I thought
kept
it was going to
reading-
be a reversal where Okonye was going to fall deep, but it was actually Denny. So
exactly. I kept reading. Nobody expected Washington to have Denny available at 9. Not one soul had that happen, except for the just random possibility boards. But Denny goes to Washington at 9. The only issue I see here is Washington should have gone into the draft looking for a defensive player, and instead they just got another offensive weapon. You as a Sixers fan, I know you buy into the take the best player available. What do you feel about this pick for Washington?
Well, and they needed a small forward. I mean, we'll get into John Wall in a little bit, but they have Wall, Beal. They re-signed Bertans, which we'll get into as well. They have center depth with Thomas Bryant. That's a good squad. They just really need a small forward. Otto Porter Jr. was not cutting it. So I think that's the right pick for what they had. I also think he could be a bust, but I really think if he is good, this is going to be this turning point where we're going to start saying that playing professionally overseas is really a lot better than playing in college. And honestly, if it wasn't for Darko Milicic, I think we'd be saying that right now with people like Luka. If LaMelo Ball pans out as well, same type of deal.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. That movement might be coming a little sooner than people would expect. Another surprising move that happened right at the end of the top 10 with number 10. Phoenix was on the clock. We knew that they were looking for a piece that could help them compete after the Chris Paul trade that we're going to get into. They took Jalen Smith, who most people had going somewhere around 20. And in fact, the guy that I projected to go 10, Precious, would fall all the way to 20. We'll get to that in a moment. But Jalen Smith at 10, it's kind of a stretch, but he's a stretch 4. He's got a jump shot. He's long and athletic. I think Phoenix was just like, look, this is the guy we want. We're not getting any trades that we really want to move down with. Let's just take him. Is that the right mindset to have, though? Is it worth just taking a player while you have the pick rather than trying to trade down when they would more likely still be available?
It's always a gut call, but at the same time, if you have the chance to take the player that you're really high on, you might as well go for it. And especially in this draft where we really don't know who are going to be hits and who are going to be misses. Like, we can obviously see who's going to be at least decent. This draft is so iffy, though, with COVID and all that, that sometimes you kind of just got to take a shot in the dark and see what happens. Because everyone's picks were sort of all over the place. So if they didn't pick him, maybe 11 does. And
very true. Very true. So a guy who kind of slipped through the cracks, though, different side of the ball here. Tyrese Halliburton. I'm not a huge fan because he went to Iowa City, but I do recognize how impressive his game was when he did play a longer point guard. He went to Sacramento at 12. He'll back up De'Aaron Fox, who, again, we'll talk about in a bit, but just signed a big contract to stay. Why do you think teams passed on Halliburton, especially given, how highly he was supposed to be picked?
Dude, I don't know. I had him slated to the Pistons. I was like, they're going to probably trade Rose. They need a point guard. And they took Killian Hayes, who same type of deal. Euro player. Maybe he's same thing where he's going to be that star because he's been playing professionally for a good chunk of his life. I don't know. I thought if he didn't get picked by the Pistons, he'd go to the Knicks. I mean, Obi Toppin fell to them, which was probably in their case the better pick. Brooklyn guy, box office, room runner, etc. So after that, most teams weren't looking for a point guard. I think the Kings, even though they're not looking for a point guard, went with the best pick in the draft, which was him, especially at that point. For spacing reasons and depth reasons, I don't necessarily love it, but it's the right pick for them, 100%.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. This draft had a lot of point guards in it, like a lot of point guard talent. I think 12 through 15, all of those picks were point guards outside of maybe one. So I understand why other teams would maybe try and draft some of the other positions because they're going to be a little more, they're a little more rare. You're not going to find those players in this draft as much. But when someone like that falls, I agree with you. I just get hit with the what happened? Like who messed up here? But either way, Halliburton now in a good chance, good young team for him to try and learn, build up some strength, and we'll see how his career goes. But he'll be backing up De'Aaron Fox for the time being. So I had two teams with steals of the draft. And both of them happen to be our two favorite teams. I'm not just saying that because I love our teams. I'm genuinely saying that because at 20 and 21, the Sixers and Heat stole the draft. Number 20, Miami Heat drafted Precious Achiuwa out of Memphis, power forward center. I'm just going to say he looks a lot like Bam with a jump shot, but we'll see how that pans out. And then the Sixers drafted at that point, then at 21, the best talent, the most talented player available in Tyrese Maxey, a shooting guard, always good to add guard depth out of Kentucky. And I'll say this, they brought on John Calipari right afterwards, after that draft pick. And he said, guys, those 19, 20 teams ahead of Philadelphia, they're going to regret not taking Tyrese Maxey. And the reason I bring that up is because John Calipari's job is to recruit young basketball players. And he is, in my opinion, the best recruiter in college basketball. And that shows based off all the great Kentucky players in basketball. So somebody whose best quality of his extremely prestigious job is picking out young talent. And he is telling me that this is the guy I should be paying attention to. That as a Sixers fan would have made me feel really good. That would have been like, ooh, we might have just gotten somebody that fell a little bit under the radar and could really turn into a good piece. So those two guys, Precious and Tyrese, I think are going to end up being the steals of this draft. I'm going to be honest, I expect both of them to be on one of the All-NBA rookie teams this year.
Well, the best part about both those picks is 20 and 21. Say both of them are busts. Okay, you blew a late first-round pick. Mm-hmm. That happens every year.
Exactly.
And Precious, I think that's a good pick. I think it'll be very useful for your team, especially just with depth from the forward position. Tyrese Maxey, much needed shooting. People love to hate Kentucky, but a lot of their players pan out pretty well. I mean, just last year, Tyler Herro, that's already good. So, and there's a million others I can talk about. Devin Booker, AD.
About to say NBA champion Anthony Davis is a good one.
Yeah, there's a ton of players. So I'm very happy with that pick. I know you're happy with your pick.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to get to a little bit more with the Sixers right about now, or a little bit.
We're getting there. We're working towards it. Just a little bit more draft news to get to
rush. Here. There's a lot.
Guys, there's a lot. Don't you worry. The mega episode's in full swing.
Double mega.
Good guy to mention here, RJ Barrett, another top point guard talent that was projected to go in the lottery, fell.
Wait. RJ Hampton.
RJ Hampton. Did I say Barrett?
Yes.
No. All right. So RJ Hampton played in New Zealand this past season, was projected to go in the lottery, fell, was either 22 or 24 to what was the Bucks, and then would end up being flipped to the Knicks in a trade in I want to say the holiday trade.
I don't know about that. I think it was a trade straight up, wasn't it?
Might have been a different deal.
Irrelevant, but he's on the Nuggets.
Yes, Hampton is heading to the Nuggets to add point guard depth to Monte Morris and the bubble breakout Jamal Murray. So great depth there. And honestly, at 20, late 20s, RJ Hampton, a top lottery guy, even if he looked a little bit worse through the tapes, like if this guy's been projected in the lottery all year and you have him at mid to late 20s, you just got to take the chance, I think. So I like that pick for the Nuggets. They're already a pretty good team. They're going to need to add some more forwards now based off the free agency news, but we'll see what they do there. And then the last pick I want to talk about. So I mentioned I got 4 picks exactly right, numbers 1, 2, 3. And the only other pick I got right was number 29, Malachi Flynn to the Toronto Raptors. The reason I say this is because I've been saying that Malachi Flynn was going to the Raptors all year, because Malachi Flynn is the next Fred VanVleet. They are so similar, came from not very well-known schools to be this awesome college point guard. They play with such energy. They can shoot the ball. They can move the ball. They're not the best defender, but they can handle themselves on that end of the court. And so with that draft pick, and then we'll get to the Fred VanVleet contract, I love that pick for Toronto. I think Malachi Flynn could turn into one of those just dog dudes that works as hard as he possibly can at every moment. So I love that, and I was a little proud of myself for calling that pick correctly. So I was, a little pat on the back there.
Yeah.
So other than that, so what are your big winners and losers of this draft?
Okay, I'm gonna give a big shout out to the Sixers for drafting Tyrese Maxey. Second round, they drafted Isaiah Joe. They drafted another player who I'm blanking on, but it's what I'm getting at is they made, who's it?
Paul Reed.
Thank you. What I'm getting at though is they've made a bunch of good picks that have gave them guard depth for once in their life. I'm not talking like they've always had guards, but their guards play has been very iffy. So I'm very happy about that. Do you want to talk about the trades? We can talk about this Seth Curry, Josh Richardson trade momentarily. Another winner, I think, is the Nuggets. They got RJ Hampton, and you can talk about how good or how bad you think he is. But the Nuggets, I love the way they draft, because they draft these players who in high school or before they came to college were just all hyped up. You had Michael Porter Jr., you had Bol, who's 7 feet tall and can shoot. And RJ Hampton's another good example of that. All three of those guys, whether it was Porter Jr. falling with injury, Bol also with injury, RJ Hampton just kind of going overseas and sort of getting lost in the shuffle to a degree with all the hype. I love that how they draft, because they're taking these players who showed superstardom. There's name recognition behind, but at the end of the day, they may have fell under the radar, and they're just going to take chances on them. If one of those pans out, they look like geniuses. And if they don't, well, so be it. It's a late 20th pick. And Michael Porter Jr. is starting to pan out already. Bol, we'll see on him. Jury's still on him, but he's shown flashes of greatness. And RJ Hampton, I think, can be another one, especially for guard depth.
Yeah, no, 100%. That part of the draft is where teams tend to be like, all right, we can take a risk here. But Nuggets are always like, we're going to take a risk, but we're going to take a calculated risk. We're going to pick the guy that's supposed to be the best, regardless of where he's from, or we're going to run with it. I love it. I am also a huge fan of that strategy. So yeah, big shout out to the Nuggets there.
Going off of that, I don't know if you won or lost, but you did a lot, goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Sam Presti is now hoarding picks. Like, he's got a problem. The man goes and buys a pick from the Rockets and then proceeds to he gets Ricky Rubio in a trade and then sends him right back to Minnesota for like a pick. Man's wheeling and dealing.
In 2023, we are going to be seeing just two teams in the NBA draft, the Pelicans and the Thunder. We'll get to that in a little bit, as the Thunder just keep acquiring assets. But the day of the draft, before the draft, any of the picks had been selected, there was a stat that I saw. The Oklahoma City Thunder, from now until 2026, had 17 first-round draft picks, and through 2027, 27 total draft picks. And that was before all of the signing and tradings and buying of draft picks, before all of that. So the Thunder are ready to take an entire draft class. I'm confident it's happening. But with that, we're going to slide on out of the draft, because we have, do we have some free agency and trading news to get to?
Yeah.
Wow. Just going to take a quick second, take a little bit of this whiskey, and get on that free agent tracking. We're going to start with a rumor that we had last week, which was Chris Paul on the outs of Oklahoma City. He is, in fact, gone. He has been dealt to Phoenix, as we predicted, to team up with Devin Booker. The trade was Rubio, Kelly Oubre Jr., a couple other smaller pieces, and then a draft pick or two. Chris Paul will be slotting in, like I said, with Booker, Ayton. We just talked about how they drafted Jalen Smith. They made a couple other signings now. A young team mixed with the right veterans. Where do you see Phoenix ending up once the standings kind of start to take shape in the West?
I think they'll definitely the playoffs are extended this year, so they take the top 10 teams that have playing games for 7, 8, 9, 10. I think they'll at least make that top 10. I always discount how much Chris Paul has in terms of impact. I think they're going to be probably like 6 or 7 at best, though. I think there are some other teams that are just going to be too much. Like, they're a young team with the exception of Chris Paul, and they'll do well as long as Booker doesn't just go into a slump. So the future's on the up for them, though.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I was going to say this one to the end, but this is really the only other big splash Phoenix has made in free agency. Just happened today. Jay Crowder signing a 3-year, I think it was somewhere around $29 to $30 million deal with Phoenix. It was expected that Miami was not going to give him more than one guaranteed season, as they're ramping up to go after Giannis next offseason. So he comes to Phoenix. He's more than likely going to slot in as the starting 4. So that leaves you with this potential starting lineup of Paul, Booker, Michael Bridges, a young defender, Jay Crowder, and DeAndre Ayton. I like that team. I could see them even being in the top 5 in the West, to be completely honest.
You're missing Aaron Baines and you're missing Frank Kaminsky, which I don't
Aaron
appreciate.
Baines had his option declined,
What?
Frank Kaminsky had his option declined.
Okay.
Aaron Baines is an unrestricted free agent who is expected to leave Phoenix.
Well, he's going to get the bag, so
he is getting a lot of attention from contending teams. Miami and Boston are two of those teams I keep hearing.
Aaron Baines back to Boston would be weird. I wouldn't like him as much.
I wouldn't like him as much, but I would respect it because I think that'd be a pretty good career move. But we can get to the Aaron Baines tracking in a little while. Trust me, we're all over the Aaron Baines market.
Aaron Baines.
Don't you worry. We're still offering him 3 years, $65 million to come onto the show, but we'll get there when we get there. So moving out of Phoenix, contenders in the West are going to be all over the place this year. And you have to start at the top with the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers, who have made 3 moves so far in free agency. And my God, have they been sensational moves. We're going to start with the lowest of the low one. That was just signing Wesley Matthews, expecting to be their 3-and-D starting shooting guard, the replacement for Danny Green, who was traded to the Thunder, and we'll get to where he went after that, for Dennis Schroeder. They traded their first-round pick and Danny Green for Schroeder, who knows if he's even going to be starting or coming off the bench at this point with LeBron running the helm, but Dennis Schroeder was the runner-up for the Sixth Man of the Year this year, and they got him for a draft pick. You know who else signed with the Lakers, by the way?
I wonder who else signed with them.
The recipient of the Sixth Man of the Year, Montrezl Harrell, shocked the LA Clippers.
Stunner.
Literally just walked to the other side of half court and said, "I'm a Laker now." 2 years, I think it was around 19 million.
19, yeah.
Apparently, Nick Jokic is the reason he lost a lot of that money based off their performances in that playoff series. But Harrell's a Laker. It's expected Davis re-signs, so it would be Schroeder, Matthews, LeBron, Davis, Harrell. Is anyone stopping that?
Well, there's a team that made a few offseason acquisitions that I think matches up with them very, very well. Want to get to the little second half of the trade with Dennis Schroeder? Where did Danny Green go?
Yeah, nope. This is a good time. So Danny Green got flipped in. Okay, so Daryl Morey, as we mentioned earlier, he stepped down from the Rockets. He then came over to Philadelphia, going to try and help Elton Brand. And in about 5 minutes, taught Elton Brand how to do his job.
Yes.
He immediately traded Al Horford and a first-round pick for Danny Green from the Oklahoma City Thunder. So Danny Green now expected to be starting 2 or 3 for Philadelphia. Great 3-and-D guy who's won back-to-back championships, 3 total now. And then on draft day, they traded Josh Richardson and a first-round pick for shooting guard Seth Curry, who, as we all know, the brother of Steph Curry, was actually in college projected to be the better shooter. So that's let you know how projections work. But Seth Curry going to
hold up with that. All right. You've angered me already. Good. First and foremost, Seth Curry, while he wasn't drafted in the lottery like his brother, went to the G League, has a higher shooting percentage than his brother from 3. I'm just letting you know that right now. We're going to move on from that. Daryl Morey, for some unknown reason, operates like Sixers Twitter. And to me, it's actually incredible where everyone's been like, dump Al Horford at the first crack of dawn on when the Morey ends. He's like, okay. Then he's like, I'm going to get Danny Green as a shooter who we've always wanted. And then we won last year, couldn't get. They got him. They got Seth Curry, we've been fiending over him for literal years. It's tough because I wish they didn't give up Josh Richardson because his contract's pretty nice. And he's a good player to have, but I am okay with what they did for that. I think the Mavericks got a great player and be very useful for their team as well. So I think that trade benefits both sides.
Just on that for a second, they're a team that's desperately needed defense out of the guard position, and that's exactly what Josh Richardson provides. They also drafted Josh Green, who was maybe the second or third best defensive guard in that draft class. So that's what they were looking for. But for the Sixers, shooting was the biggest priority this offseason. It was very evident when the Sixers couldn't really score from the outside against the Celtics in the playoffs. So you go out, you get Green, you get Curry. So now you got your backup guards, you got your backup forwards. There was one thing missing, and they knocked the damn ball out of the park with this one, guys. So NBA champion, former 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, Dwight Howard, was expecting to come off this run with the Lakers, getting somewhere around $10 million over 1 to 2 years. And then the market shrank immediately. He came out and was saying that, or his camp at least was saying that the market just closed on him. There was no interest. There was one team offering him a contract, and everybody expected that to be the Lakers. Lo and behold, the Sixers were said team, swooped in with the veterans minimum, somewhere around $2.3, $2.6 million. And Dwight Howard will be the man backing up Joel Embiid. I will say this, though, as awesome as that does sound, the last time the Sixers tried to bring in a great backup for Joel Embiid was Al Horford. Age does come into play here, but what's the difference in feeling here from last year getting Horford to this year getting Howard?
They wanted Horford to play power forward, and they tried that, and it blew up in our faces because it was a solid defensive team, but the shooting we couldn't get out of anything, and the spacing. I won't get into that. I'm done with Al Horford. He's gone. He's out of my memory. Dwight Howard, though, he plays the same way. Like, he's like Nerlens Noel, just older. Obviously, he's a very good defensive player, rim runner. Doesn't do a whole. He plays in the paint very well. He's cheap, very cheap compared to Al Horford. Al Horford's running like $106 million.
Horford was on a max deal.
Yeah, and Dwight Howard is getting at most $3 million a year, and I don't think he's
the minimum amount he can be receiving.
Yes, so that to me is much better equity, and I am so happy with it because they really did need power forward center depth. Kyle O'Quinn was not cutting it last year. Al Horford, it was useful, but we wanted him to be a starter. So I'm ecstatic with it. The Sixers, for the most part, got smaller, which is good. They still have their height, don't be wrong, but they can actually do a lot more now. And then teams like the Mavs, they got bigger. And before we go on, I want to shoot my conspiracy theory with you. So the Mavs, they're getting bigger. This is the best lineup. We're going to call it big men. So you have Luka running points. All right. So he's like, I don't know, 6'7", pretty tall dude.
Tall dude.
And then you have he's a small guy. And then you have Maxi Kleber, Kristaps Porzingis. You have Boban, and then you trade. I don't know. You throw a pick to the Celtics and get Taco Fall, and then you run the elevator with like Taco Fall and just rip off threes. Tell me that isn't the best off. Like, I would watch every Mavericks game if they're running like that.
I'm gonna be honest with you. There would be few things more tempting to watch than Bobby running the open floor and hitting a half court lob to Taco Fall. I really
love it.
That'd be amazing. I'm all for it. Any Mavericks personnel listening, get on this. This is the way to the championship. Hand the ball off to your taller player until he can dunk it. Love it.
For next year, I gotta say, as long as Porzingis is healthy, which I do not think he's gonna be, I think he's gonna miss some significant time. But if he can come back in time for the playoffs, and Luka doesn't just take a massive regression, which I also do not think he will, Dallas is a scary team. The Sixers are now a much scarier team. And then I think the other really scary team is going to be the Nuggets. Obviously, the Lakers are in that mix, the Bucks, the Heat. But in terms of really bolstering themselves up for this offseason, those three teams have done a great job thus far.
I have to completely agree with you on that one. Yeah, we're going to see how all of this starts to pan out shortly, but Dallas, as we knew, needed defense, and that's pretty much all they've acquired so far. So they're on the right track. I did just see actually a little bit ago that Tim Hardaway opted into his $19 million one extra year of his contract. Pretty obvious, you take the $19 million there, but other than that, they've only gotten defensive players back. So
imagine Boban locking up Steph Curry. Could you imagine that?
I'm going to let you know right now, 2K lets it happen.
I believe it.
We're going to move on before I go on too large of a rant about how bad 2K is as a game system. So we're going to move on. So there was a massive deal that keeps getting bigger. So obviously the Bucks had to make some kind of offseason move to keep Giannis. That's what they have to do. Their main concern now is making sure Giannis stays in Milwaukee long term. They made a deal that has now expanded to 3 teams and might even expand to a 4th team. The general premise of the deal was the Pelicans sending defensive shooting guard Drew Holiday to the Bucks, more likely to start at point guard. But that was the main crux of the deal. The added in piece was was the Oklahoma City Thunder. Steven Adams would be going from the Thunder to the Pelicans, And instead of Eric Bledsoe and George Hill both going to the Pelicans, now George Hill, along with Darius Miller, will go to the Thunder, and Eric Bledsoe will go to the Pelicans to team up with Lonzo Ball in the backcourt. That's the trade at the moment. It is still subject to change. Again, there's been a fourth team rumored to be in it. I've heard Cleveland. I think I've seen New York as a potential option. So we'll see. But at the moment, Jrue Holiday is in Milwaukee. That part's confirmed. Steven Adams to New Orleans is confirmed. Both those teams getting things they needed. The Pelicans getting the big center. The Bucks getting the extra star for Giannis and Middleton. And then the Thunder, of course, keep acquiring their assets, their draft picks. That's all they want out of these trades. That's all they want anymore. They don't want actual players. They just want the draft picks. And I love it. So as that trade continues to progress, we will let you know, obviously, if any more gets added to it. But Jrue Holiday to the Bucks. My only question is it enough?
No. It's
Why
not
is that?
enough. Jrue Holiday is, how old is Jrue Holiday? He's in his 30s, isn't he?
Somewhere around 30, young 30s, but yeah.
Maybe like 31.
Yeah.
He's getting older. Like, he's definitely a very useful player, but he's starting to regress. I'm torn because he's better than Eric Bledsoe.
Yes.
And we'd all tend to agree with that. Like, if Eric Bledsoe was playing at what he was in Phoenix, like, the Bucks would be a much better team. So I think it's worthwhile. I think what's going to happen, though, is the Bucks are just going to run into a roadblock, and it's going to be just disastrous. Because if Giannis goes down again, I don't think Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday can bail them out altogether. I think
that's a very good
them point. As a three, like a tandem, sure, that works. But I don't think without Giannis, it doesn't work.
I think overall they got better. I think that's pretty clear. Holiday's a great player. I love his defense. But my question has always, I don't even know if Miami is the best team in the East anymore with Durant and Kyrie healthy. So my question is, did they get definitively better than the Heat? And I don't even know if they're remotely better than the Heat yet. I don't think they made the moves quite yet to get better than Miami. Now, that's the opinion of a biased Heat fan. So let's go to the other moves Milwaukee made really quick. There was that big trade with Bogdanovich that fell through. There was a move that was going to send Bogdanovich in a sign and trade from the Kings to the Bucks. He declined to sign. He wanted to test the open market. The trade fell through. Milwaukee wasn't giving up too terribly much. DiVincenzo was the biggest asset they were giving up in that deal. Yeah. So instead of that, they ended up signing Bobby Portis to a 2-year deal and DJ Augustine, the savvy point guard out of Orlando, to a 3-year, $21 million deal. So now they've started to bolster their bench a little bit. They don't have Marvin Williams anymore. They're still trying to move Ilyasova. What piece would they need at this point to be the top contender in the East, or at least like the clear favorite in the East?
They need that third star. I just don't think Jrue Holiday is it. Like, Jrue Holiday is about as close to a third star as you can get, but I don't think he cuts it for them. And that's my issue, where I just think at this point you gave up a good amount of equity for Jrue Holiday. I don't think you're going to make any more deals. You sort of just have to cultivate talent. Like, maybe Connaughton takes a step forward. Maybe he's super useful, but who knows? And that's just kind of it's a lottery at this point. Like, we really don't know.
Yeah. The other issue that I forgot to mention was they traded 3 picks in that trade. 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps in that deal. And the team they're trading to gets the better end of the pick swaps. So you're giving up so much and banking on Jrue Holiday being the thing that takes you that next step forward. And as you're saying, we don't believe that's enough. So I don't really know what they can do anymore at this point, specifically speaking on just cap space. But they need forwards other than Giannis. I mean, they got Portis, but Bobby Portis doesn't really make you a better team. I think they need athletic guys that can play defense, that can run in transition. They need more than just a supporting cast for Giannis. They need guys that can do things on their own, and they haven't really done that yet. So I don't really know what to expect from Milwaukee for the rest of the offseason. The only draft pick they had was Jordan Nwora, stretch 4 out of Minnesota. But I don't know. I could even see Milwaukee losing in the second round again, to be completely honest.
I don't know about that. Obviously it's either second round or they're going all the way most likely. But It's going to come down who they're matched. I think they could take the Heat on better this year. I'm not saying the Heat got worse, but I think they'll just be ready to play them. And honestly, with home court, it's going to be a little bit different. Like I know the bubble, the Heat just decimated them, but there's a difference between home and a home crowd and no crowd.
Sure.
I think that'll help. I don't know. It's weird because I want to say the Sixers are going to be that team or the Nets, but I also think the Bucks style against the Nets would just kill them because it's so methodical and kind of slow and dishing out. While I'm assuming the Nets are going to be run and gun with Nash and D'Antoni there.
You would assume so.
Yeah.
So we'll see how Milwaukee does. Again, I wouldn't, as a Bucks fan, be necessarily upset, but it's one of those you just got to see what happens type deals. Again, we'll see what else they do for the rest of the offseason to add to that team. But moving on, because again, we still have so many things to do. Just want to quick touch upon a couple players that opted in. Evan Fournier opted into his deal with the Magic. DeMar DeRozan opted into his deal with the Spurs. That could potentially be some kind of sign and trade opt-in, but also the rumor was to the Lakers. And now with Harrell and Schroeder, they have less cap space to work with, so maybe not. And then the other one was Andre Drummond, who opted into his like $28-something million deal with the Cavaliers. That was more so because Drummond researched the market, realized nobody was going to pay him that much money. NBA general managers are not willing to pay just straight up defensive and rebounding centers anymore. They don't see it as valuable. So Drummond's going to stay in Cleveland for one more year. Ricky Rubio, as we mentioned, was part of that trade with Chris Paul to Phoenix. He was sent to Oklahoma City. They then dealt him back to Minnesota.
Brutal.
He played for a few years ago. You were saying earlier, we love Ricky Rubio, but we're not huge on the Timberwolves here. What does that move do for Minnesota, though?
I don't know. Probably nothing. It's like a backup point guard. I think it was like them trying to be nice and be like, hey, it's like we're Ricky Rubio, you're coming home, and he's like, shit.
That's fair. The other big asset that wasn't a pick moved in that Chris Paul trade was Kelly Oubre Jr., as we mentioned, went to the Thunder. He then, almost immediately after landing in Oklahoma City, his names kept popping up in trades again. He then got sent to the Warriors for a 2021 protected first-round pick, which is now where he will reside, and he and Wiggins will take over the 2 and 3 duties, with Klay Thompson now expected to miss yet another season, unfortunately, with the torn Achilles, ruptured Achilles, whichever one. Neither is good. But so Oubre, now a Warrior. Do you think he and Wiggins are going to fit well together?
I don't like either of them playing the two. I like Oubre playing the two more than Wiggins.
Interesting.
But because Wiggins can't really shoot. We've established that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oubre can at least kind of shoot. Like I like Oubre playing a forward more than a shooting guard, but he can at least shoot. I don't know. My gripe is Klay Thompson is so valuable, and I'm so distraught that he got hurt because I was really looking forward to seeing, revenge tour type Klay. He's missed an entire season, right? I don't know. They're missing that shooting guard piece. Like Klay Thompson is so invaluable that it sucks that he's out for the season because I really think they would have made a push. But they did the best they could with what was available. Kelly Oubre Jr. is going to be a good player for their team.
Oh yeah.
But they also have what's his name, Eric Pashkal.
Oh yeah,
he's pretty useful too. Like he really had a breakout rookie season. And they have some guard depth too, but it's gonna be an iffy fit. I hope it works. I always do like the Warriors. It's one of the few teams I've saw in person. So I'm a big Warriors guy. I like the tandem there, and
I agree with everything you said except for the Warriors have guard depth. For those aware, the Warriors have 0 backup guards right now.
They have Kai Bowman from Boston College.
No. They just waived Kai Bowman.
Oh, that's
they waived Kai Bowman. So their only other guards on roster right now are Damian Lee and Jordan Poole, who I love your bobblehead.
Jordan, thank you. I got this straight from the Oracle. This is straight
out of Golden State, guys.
Yeah, this is for obviously you can't see it, but I have one of the things above my desk is a Klay Thompson bobblehead. And I got it. They're playing the Nuggets, and they're giving out. It was Klay Thompson bobblehead night, so I went early to get one of these. If anyone wants to buy it, I'll take a check for, I don't know, whatever Klay Thompson's getting paid, call it even.
One. Drop the contracts.
They cut Kai Bowman. I'm distraught.
Yeah, that one. The Warriors probably going to try and sign some backup guards. Again, they just have those 2 shooting guards. I don't believe Chasing Randall's on the team anymore. Maybe Michael Mulder, I guess they do technically still have. They signed him for 2 years. I believe he played for North Carolina. He's a taller guard, but again, exactly your response is pretty much what it would be. They need some guard depth, but other than that, I like the acquisition of Oubre to team up with Wiggins. We'll see if they can play the 2, but who knows? Golden State is now a much larger question mark than they were supposed to be this season. But I think most people with a healthy Steph Curry would still expect them to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Okay, keep it moving down the list. There was a 3-team deal, or at least a 2-team deal that expanded into a 3-team deal between the Nets, the Clippers, and the Pistons. So basically what happened in the deal was Landry Shaman went to Brooklyn to be the backup shooting guard for the Nets. Luke Kennard was sent from Detroit to the Clippers. And the Clippers sent Rodney Magruder back to the Pistons and the 19th pick in the draft, which ended up being Saddiq Bey out of Villanova. So the trade was essentially Shaman to Brooklyn, Kennard to LA, and Magruder and Bey to the Pistons. Not the biggest move, but again, like I talked about at the beginning, it's depth moves. It was filling out the roster, finding the guys that are important. Shaman, a 3-point floor spacer for Brooklyn. Kennard kind of does the same thing, but then Saddiq Bey, he's a versatile 3-4 type. I think you had him going in your top 10 in your projections.
Yeah.
A very solid all-around player. I think the loser of this trade is the Clippers because they lost a pick and Shaman for Kennard, who I would argue is worse than Shaman.
I would argue he's better than Shaman, marginally. Okay. I like Landry Shaman. I really do. The Clippers just were not using him at all. I think Kennard can be a starter for them if they so choose to play that type of offense, traditional type 1 through 5. But yeah, you could argue they gave up too much to get Kennard. They gave up a pick and Shaman. But I kind of like it. I don't know. I'm intrigued. It's going to depend how Kennard plays. I think he's a little bit more expensive than Shaman, but I think the play, it's not much. They're on rookie deals.
No, yeah.
But I'm kind of a fan of that. I don't know if it makes them significantly better. I'd argue it wouldn't, but it's something.
Well, it's a good shooting guard to start in place of Lou Williams, who they like bringing off the bench. So I do like it in that regard. I also love Shaman to Brooklyn. I'm very high on Landry Shaman. I think he's a very good player. I saw him rock the Heat earlier in the season for 30 points. It was insane. He has one of the fastest releases in the NBA.
Super quick.
So him backing up, Durant and LeVert in Brooklyn could be a really good thing for them. And Detroit just getting a little bit younger. Magruder didn't really matter, but Saddiq Bey is, as we said, a nice versatile rookie for them to have. A lot of forwards in Detroit right now, and we're going to get to that later. I'm going to run through just a couple free agent moves here that weren't necessarily the biggest, but are definitely worth noting. Another Brooklyn player, another Brooklyn shooter, Joe Harris, signed a $45 million deal. We're actually not going to rattle for a second. We are going to talk about this one for a second. Joe Harris signed $47 million. The reason we want to bring this up is because there was essentially a precedent set, by Washington forward Davis Bertans getting 5 years, $80 million, essentially setting the precedent of what a shooter was going to be worth this offseason. So what were your thoughts on both the Bertans and the Joe Harris contracts?
Well, the Harris for 4 years, 74, and then Bertans 5 year, 80. It, like you said, it's setting the precedent for shooters. Bertans is definitely a starting caliber power forward. He can shoot real well. Joe Harris, I want to say he's going to be a role player. He'll start to a degree. I mean, that the Nets are stacked, so it's kind of irrelevant. But they're both starting caliber players. So that has set the market for it, which is good. Both those guys got a very well-deserved contract. Honestly, I'd even argue Bertans' contract was a little bit below what I would have. It's kind of cheap in my opinion. 5 years, 80 is $16 million a year. 18 million a year. No, 16. My math was correct today. It's a good deal for the Wizards. I'm sure Bertans is happy to be locked in for 5 years, that type of thing. So it's good that they kept their shooters, though. Shooters are going to be more and more valuable, which going back to what we're talking about the Sixers, I'm very happy that they got two pretty established shooters in Seth Curry and Danny Green. Danny Green, you can meme him all you want, but there's a reason he's getting his money.
Yes. We wanted to specifically bring this up because Alex and I were having a little conversation earlier about The Wizards, after that signing, the Wizards had a good draft with Denny at 9 and other things. They had filled in their roster pretty well. But I've been reading a lot on Washington, specifically John Wall. He's a player I like a lot. And so we were talking about how this team is kind of looking closer to a contender, maybe not like a championship run, but definitely a team that could make the playoffs. And I recalled something that I was reading about John Wall and about Bradley Beal. They will never say it on social media. They will never say it when asked in an interview. They will not talk about it outwardly, but they don't want to play together anymore. They appreciate everything that Washington has done for each of them individually. Washington has been very nice to both of them, very kind to their families and such. But there is no winning culture in Washington. John Wall is at the point in his career where he knows he's never going to get the money he was supposed to keep getting throughout the course of his career. So he just wants to be in a spot where he can showcase that he can still play. And Bradley Beal wants to win. He said it all year is he hates losing. He hates just the fact that the Wizards are great offensively and bad defensively. I would expect Wall to be the one moved more so than Beal if they were to move one, but the general understanding is that one of them won't be on the team by the end of this season.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with my buddy last night because we were talking about the Wizards. Like he's a huge Davis Bertans fan. Like he loves the idea of a big man that can shoot. And I do too. I love that idea. But at least up until the sort of rumors that were going on about John Wall, which we'll get to in a sec, you had John Wall, Bradley Beal, our boy Denny, Davis Bertans, and then Thomas Bryant at center. That is a very good starting lineup. You could argue not very good defensively, but offensively, they're going to put up points. And that team has a chance at making, I don't know, I'm not saying they'll get the number 1 seed in the East, but they could be a sleeper pick for maybe as high as a 5 seed in the East. But then I got a bomb dropped to me last night. Reports saying John Wall had been talked about being in trades. And he's like, I want out. And going off with Robby just broke, that makes a lot of sense that Beal and Wall don't get along. I tend to imagine John Wall is a little bit like an asshole to play with. I tend to imagine it's kind of hard to mesh with him to a degree because he wants it to be his team. But with the injuries and everything else, I don't know if I'd want him to be like the leader.
Yeah, it's tough when it's an outspoken guy like that who hasn't necessarily gotten to be on the court and prove his worth recently. It just kind of sounds like a dude yapping in your ear at a certain point. We'll see. There was talk of a Russell Westbrook, John Wall swap that kind of simmered down, and now there's no more advancing talks in that sense. It's likely that John Wall starts the season in Washington. It's likely that they both start the season in Washington. But from what I've been reading up on, if they get a good enough trade, they are going to probably pull the trigger on it, especially if it's for John Wall. They like be a little bit more. He's younger, contract's a little friendlier. But that's the situation in Washington right now. They're almost out of roster spots. I think 1 or 2 left for the offseason. They might bring back Shabazz Napier as an extra guard. Who knows? But
my man.
But that's where Washington's at, kind of in that middle ground. So now I'm just going to run through a couple free agent signings, not the biggest, but definitely important to their team. So first, the Miami Heat retained both Goran Dragic and Myers Leonard. Leonard, 2 years, $20 million. Dragic, 2 years, $37 million. It's expected for Dragic the first year's 20, the second year's 17. Again, Miami ramping up for next season to try and sign Giannis potentially, or Beal, whoever is available still. So they're trying to sign contracts that are going to make players happy this year and be a little team friendlier next year. And the other guy that Miami signed yesterday was Mo Harkless, 1 year, $3.8 million. He was offered much more money from other teams, said he declined to play for the Heat, who just won the Eastern Conference, and is going to test the market next year when there's a few more teams willing to spend a little more money for a defensive, versatile forward. Miami does have a little bit more news coming up, but we're going to get to that as we get to today's updates. But the other signings I want to mention, Derek Favors back to Utah to be the backup center. Rodney Hood, who declined his player option, ends up re-signing with Portland anyway. Also, Derek Jones Jr. comes in to add some forward depth. They're probably preparing to not have Carmelo Anthony anymore. I don't remember if I mentioned this at the top or not, but the Blazers also acquired Robert Covington for Trevor Ariza and what was the 16th pick in the draft, and also acquired Enes Kanter in a sign-and trade with Boston. So they have bolstered their roster with the loss of Hassan Whiteside. moved on from Trevor Ariza. He wasn't really what they were doing. And again, preparing to not have Melo on roster. Those are just some of the quick run through. Also, Alec Burks to the Knicks, Robin Lopez to the Wizards, just some quick ones to mention. Key role players signing with some teams. That is important. But now to get back onto the top stories, to Sacramento, we're going to go. We talked about how they drafted Tyrese Halliburton to be their backup point guard, one of the steals of the draft. Their starting point guard, De'Aaron Fox, a cornerstone of their rebuild, has just signed a 5-year max extension worth approximately $136 million to stay in Sacramento. He is now the face of the organization. What would, in your opinion, would be the best type of player to pair with De'Aaron Fox?
They have the pieces, which is kind of why I'm thinking about this for a sec. Like, Buddy Hield, if he stays there, is a good piece to have. I mean, I'm assuming Bogdanovich is going to leave. That's kind of been the theme with all these.
Bogdanovich is still on roster. He signed like a 4-year deal last offseason.
The Kings guy. He's
I'm thinking the other Bogdanovich. Sorry.
No.
My bad.
It's all good. Yeah, no, he's testing the waters. But you have Buddy Hield, who's still a good shooter. Bagley, I'm going to assume, is going to be at least a decent center. You kind of just need a small forward who's like a Tyreek Evans who's not getting in trouble every year. That type of player. You really need a good quality small forward. But De'Aaron Fox is super athletic, super gifted, super fast, and a really good point guard. So I have no problem with them giving him a rookie max extension. I think that's a smart move. Like I was saying before, Halliburton, I don't know if it makes sense with the rest of the team in terms of what they have, but was the right pick, especially at the time.
Oh, yeah. But they're locked up in their guards now. Not something they're going to necessarily have to worry about moving forward. 2 really young, really talented guards now comprise their point guard depth. So the Kings looking now to just try and get back to the playoffs. That's the big thing for them. The next team I want to talk about, who's also in the hunt to try and make it back to the postseason, would be Atlanta. Atlanta is a team that I hate. I do not like the Hawks, but they have done spectacular so far since the draft. As I mentioned already at the top of the show, Onyeka Okongwu, I think, was the best draft pick in the entire draft by Atlanta. But they also made 2 splashes in free agency these last few days. Danilo Gallinari, I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 years, $65 million deal to come to Atlanta. He might be the 3. He might be the backup 4 with Collins. Not quite sure yet, but he's there. And then Chris Dunn.
Time out. You thought the Hawks gave Danilo Gallinari upwards of $30 million a year. Come on.
I wasn't really thinking about it. I was just shooting out numbers. That's
it's simple. Me. 2 years, $65 million. I would be so ready to jump out a window if I was a Hawks fan. I don't care how good Gallinari is. You're not giving him $30 million a year.
That does sound like a Hawks move, at least in my head. Though.
That's probably true too, though.
But okay, so 3 years, $65 million is a much better contract for Danilo.
Much better.
He's there for forward depth, whether in the starting lineup or off the bench. Great shooter, wants to try and win. And then Chris Dunn, like I mentioned, 2 years, 10, 11 million, something along those lines. You have your offensive specialist, Trae Young. You have your defensive specialist, Chris Dunn. Hopefully you can just figure out a way to merge 2 human beings into one, and then you have your superstar point guard. But until that point, you can run those 2 point guard sets, and it won't necessarily affect you too bad because one does one thing really well, one does the other thing really well. Those, I think, are 2 incredibly key signings to them. They lost Teague in the offseason, but that was pretty much it. Now it's just filling in the pieces, and then it's getting better. Trae Young is, as I've always loved to mention, one of the most defensively inefficient players of all time. Things like that need to start to change. Chris Dunn needs to try and get Trae Young more, initialized into the defense, trying a little bit harder, working a little bit harder. Collins and Gallinari need to work together to extend Collins out to the 3-point line. Stuff like that would just make the Hawks that little bit better, because the East isn't very hard to crack into, at least not at the bottom.
Definitely not.
It's going to be about 6 or 7 deep this year, but that 8 seed's still wide open. So if making the playoffs is the goal here, the Hawks are on that path, I think. So we're a little over halfway through the news of free agency so far. And I wanted to take this time to just take a pause. And as some of us know, there's always a player that just kind of gets looped around in trades during an off season. It's been Bino Udrich. It's been just this one guy who either his contract fits certain teams, or he's an older vet that gets traded to a bad team and he wants to go to a contender and they're willing to respect that, stuff like that. And this year it's former NBA champion Trevor Ariza. Trevor Ariza won a championship way back when with the Lakers, and he has now been on 4 different teams this week, most recently landing on Oklahoma City, or I've heard if they can't trade him, they're going to waive him so he can sign with somebody else. I just think it's fun to bring up that player.
I've tracked his progression over the past week. He went from being on the Blazers on Sunday to the Rockets on Monday to the Pistons on Wednesday, and now on Saturdays on the Thunder.
The journeyman.
The man bought 4 different houses in the span of a week. No, I'm kidding. I hope he didn't do that.
I was about to say, hopefully he's just renting apartments.
So.
Yeah, we'll see where Trevor Ariza lands up. A good defensive player. He's older, not exceedingly useful as Portland found out, but a presence, and like I said, a solid defender. So he'll probably find his way onto a contending team is towards the end of the bench spot. Oh, wow. So much news still. Malik Beasley signs 4 years, $60 million to stay in Minnesota. They acquired him at the deadline from Denver. My theory on this one was that he's just going to kind of come in and kind of push Anthony Edwards to be a little bit better. Beasley's this guy that's fought for a lot his whole career and just fighting for that starting spot that he gained, when he got traded. He's not going to want to relinquish that too quickly. So hopefully that pushes Edwards to try a little bit harder, which has been one of the big knocks on him is his, mindset about basketball. So I think it's a good signing. The money, it's a lot, but he's a good young player. We'll see how that turns out. I already mentioned the Bucks making their moves, trying to bolster Christian Wood, another athlete that you and I had both talked about in previous shows. He goes to Houston.
Absolutely.
Houston's in this weird spot right now. A lot of players on their team want out. They already traded Covington. Austin Rivers already declined his team option, his player option. So Christian Wood, we assume, would probably slot in as the starting center. What other moves would you expect Houston to try and make before the season starts then at this point?
I think
besides Harden, sorry.
Well, I think Russ is going to get out, and that's going to, depending on where he goes, that's going to give you some sort of assets back. I think they're going to try and adopt a more modern, and I don't mean like just ripping off threes like they used to do, like a more traditional type of offense. So I think they're going to get some forwards and people who aren't just like 3 savvy shooters. I mean, maybe they don't, maybe they still continue with their normal offense, but I really think they're going to have to invest in some power forwards and just kind of have Harden, if he stays, be the spotlight and him be the only guy who's really shooting.
Yeah, I will say I've been seeing that the trade market for Russell Westbrook is next to nothing. Teams are not willing to give up first-round picks for Russell Westbrook. They're ideally just trying to get rid of contracts for Russell Westbrook. Ooh. As they kind of know that he's undesirable. He and Harden don't want to play together anymore. And Russell Westbrook wants to be the guy, but it's tough to be committed to a 30-year-old bad attitude Russell Westbrook as your guy, especially when the team's trading would be a team trying to rebuild right now. I've heard the Hornets thrown out, but the Hornets is like, do you really want to trade your probably top 10 draft picks for the next couple of years for a guy who might get you to the playoffs?
Yeah, but that's very Hornets-esque. Like that sounds
that is
like
true.
What they would.
That is true, but we'll see with Russell Westbrook. Him and Oladipo are those two that have just unfortunately kind of struggled with their trade market value at this point. But Houston adding Wood, it's a real center. It's a start. It's an attempt to reboot. So we'll see how it works out for them. Another big man contract. Marcus Morris decided to stay in LA 4 years. Was it $65 million? We decided to establish. Yep. So we had talked about right after the bubble ended, or at least how they were kicked out of the bubble, that the Knicks, it was kind of like, we don't know if we want to stay together or not. But Marcus Morris has bought in. So what would be the biggest thing that this Clippers team could add now, especially after losing Harrell but getting Morris back?
They need forward depth. I mean, Marcus Morris, good small forward, especially off the bench with PG and Kawhi. But they need some sort of center or power forward. Zubac isn't going to cut it. Montrezl Harrell was useful, but he's gone. Like, you have Lou Will, you have Paul George, you have Kawhi, and as long as they're not playing like scrubs, they're gonna that's a great solid team.
Let me throw a little thought nugget to you real quick. You say a center.
Right. Sure.
The best center available outside of maybe Serge Ibaka, Hassan Whiteside. How would you feel about Whiteside in LA with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard?
Oh, that sounds toxic, though. That sounds incredibly toxic. It's not a bad signing though. He does what I like. He's what I envision a center that they need. What's the market on Whiteside though? Like I imagine, is he going to get a big contract?
All over the place. I've heard anywhere from 16 to 28.
If he's on the low end, I think that's worthwhile for the Clippers. If he wants 28, tell him to kick rocks and leave.
That's when the Hornets come back into play.
That's 100%. But 16, yeah, I'd have no problem with that. Or even up to 20. Why not?
I agree. I saw a lot of Whiteside when he was on the Heat. It's interesting. He's one of those players that is a defensive player, but the team is usually less defensively efficient when he's on the court just because he can only guard the paint. But he's extremely great at rebounding, shot blocking. The things he does well, he does incredibly. It's just the things he does poorly, he's almost useless at, like shooting the basketball, spreading the floor, guarding the perimeter. I think it'd be a fun signing. Like you say, the toxicity. I'm a huge fan of that shit. What's the term? Agent of chaos. I am here for all of that shit to just blow up in everybody's face.
I'm waiting for it's gonna happen to the Nets. I'm just waiting for it.
Especially if Harden ends up in Brooklyn.
Keep you covered there. Better yet, if Kyrie gets traded in that trade as well, and him and Russ team up for some unknown reason, that's pure toxic.
That would be the highlight of the year before anybody stepped on the court. Oh my God, that'd be great. Okay, we're winding down here. So the last theory I think that we have left here. So Jeremy Grant, after his sensational performance in the bubble, everybody kind of knew he was going to get a big contract, and he did. 3 years, $60 million, well deserved. But he was offered that contract with Denver to stay. He said no and decided to pick Detroit. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up in this way is because center Mason Plumlee of the Nuggets also signed a contract with Detroit, excuse me. Now, those two contracts that those two players just signed almost exactly matches the individual contract of one Blake Griffin. The theory is that they didn't actually sign these contracts in Detroit. They have signed them with Denver, and that it could be some kind of sign and trade for Blake Griffin. The reason I'm calling this one a theory and not just straight up saying this is happening is because I saw the report once and have not heard much after that. But that is something that is in play, would be a Jeremy Grant and Mason Plumlee type deal for Griffin, and maybe some second or first round draft picks get thrown in there. But Denver, no matter what, is losing forward depth. If they're able to get Blake, is that enough to surpass the Lakers, get to the finals?
Yeah.
Really?
I think so. The Nuggets have such a deep team. I think while the Lakers have made some really great acquisitions, they have lost some of their already limited depth. They've put a lot of thought into, like Montrezl Harrell, Dennis Schroeder. They gave up other good role players for them, which is, they're making their team better by getting the best player, but they're losing out in that depth, which is never a good thing. The Nuggets are deep. And I guess I would say what it would come down to is if the Nuggets and Lakers met, the Nuggets would have to have Murray and Jokic to have one of those sort of bubble-esque type playoff runs where they're playing maybe not like 40 a night like Murray was doing against the Jazz, but something like he's averaging at least 25, 30. Jokic is kind of doing the same thing. But Blake Griffin is one of those dudes who he wants to win. He's getting older. He has revitalized his career by being able to shoot now. I know we don't see a whole lot of him in Detroit because really no one watches Detroit games, but he can shoot the three a lot better than what he was doing in LA. Like, he's not just a dunker anymore, which is good on him for trying to make himself more useful and efficient in the modern NBA. So those three, plus you have Mason Plumlee's gone, Jeremy Grant's gone. Who else do you got? You got I'm gonna say I was about to say Michael Beasley, which I know is horribly wrong. Oh, who do they have? Help me out here.
Are we on Denver? I apologize. Is that who we're looking
for?
Denver forward depth. They got Porter Jr. They got Keita Bates-Diop.
How did I forget Michael Porter Jr.?
It's all right. I thought they drafted someone else. Either way, they don't. Power forward is the only position they're lacking in any sense of the means.
Is Paul Millsap on the move? I know
Paul Millsap is an unrestricted free agent, not expected to re-sign with Denver, and then Grant's gone.
Yeah, I wouldn't really want them to re-sign Paul Millsap. He's kind of just
he's Blake Griffin without defense.
Yeah, exactly. And Paul Millsap was kind of the issue when they were playing in the Western Conference Finals last year.
Yeah, he did some stuff, but he was kind of a liability. He's a little slow. He's one of those guys who's just kind of aging.
Yeah.
My big thing with Blake is just what does he look like after this injury? I heard that the injury, I forget exactly what it was, but it was essentially being reported that his time in the sun was done. He's no longer going to be considered a star player because of this injury. But he was getting older anyway. You know, he was one of those high flyers that you kind of expect to have a shorter career than most teams. So, but he's still a good player to have. You know, he's a great presence for younger guys. So I wouldn't mind that acquisition. The issue becomes if this trade doesn't go through and they got nothing for those two players, because then there is just a void at forward for them.
Yeah, I mean, the contract for Blake Griffin kind of blows, but I think if you can get him back, 100% do it.
Exactly. All right, so now we are finally to today's news. I don't know if we're going to have anything breaking towards the end here, but we already mentioned Jay Crowder going to Phoenix on that 3-year deal. So of the other 3 deals I'm going to mention, we're going to start with the smallest one. That was Avery Bradley to the Heat for 2 years. NBA champion with the Boston Celtics, was technically also an NBA champion with the Lakers, but he was not in the bubble, opted out. I don't remember if it was an injury or personal reasons, but he did not play in the bubble. But a 2-way defensive guard. He can shoot the ball a little bit. Like I said, excellent on the defensive side. Miami just adding depth here. Miami is not going to be making a major move, as I've stated all podcast long. They're going to be in play for Giannis next offseason. They are just trying to stay as competitive as possible. And, you know, with re-signing Dragic, adding Harkless and Bradley, I think they've done that. I'm very happy with the Heat's offseason, also with the addition of Achua in the draft. As a Heat fan, feeling great. So the big one there was Bradley. Now the 2 big money contracts. We're going to start with Gordon Hayward. So
yeah, got my
Alex repping the Utah Jazz Gordon Hayward, and that's pretty much what his contract is going to read like, is Jazz Gordon Hayward. But so Gordon Hayward earlier in the week opted out of his $34.2 million option with the Celtics. He, first of all, is done with Boston. He did not want to play there. He declined that was essentially going to decline that option almost no matter what. But as soon as he declined that option, I kept reading reports all over that the market for him was wide open. He was going to get a very lucrative offer. But the buzz around social media was, who would decline $34 million as an injured former star? It's like, there's no way you get more money than that. And lo and behold, 4 years, $120 million for Gordon Hayward to go to the Charlotte Hornets. Michael Jordan, after drafting LaMelo Ball, is trying to make moves to put the Hornets back on the map. He believes this is one of those moves. I don't know if I believe
back on the map. Were they ever on the map?
Well, yeah, I guess that's a fair point.
They were like a footnote on the map.
They've been in the playoffs. That's
they have made the playoffs before, and they got decimated by the Heat.
Yeah. The Hornets are struggling. You know, that year they had Al Jefferson when they played the Heat, and he was great, but they got swept. He got hurt. It was never going to pan out for them anyway. Have not been back since. Hayward, if he could get back to his Utah Jazz playing days, it's not a bad contract, genuinely.
It's not. And like you said, it is legitimately trying to make them a contender now. If LaMelo Ball can be any bit of the star that people have hyped him up to be, add him with Gordon Hayward. You got Devontae Graham, who's kind of a breakout star. They have some pretty good pieces. Miles Bridges is another one. They could make some noise. And that's like, it's kind of the same thing where they're going to probably be at the lower end of the Eastern Conference. But like you said, that 8 seed, pretty wide open right now. And right now, the Hornets are doing everything in their power to be maybe the 9th seed in the
they're really trying. They just want a participation medal. They will be waiving Nick Batum to make this contract possible. They will still have to pay Nick Batum his $27 million, or at least whatever if it was guaranteed, but he is no longer there. The other rumor I've heard is that they're also a team that might go after Whiteside, but that was before this contract. They do still have a lot of money in play. Nobody's really on a major contract there. So it's possible. And then with the idea of, if Ball pans out to play, have a good rookie year, you got a solid Hayward off the injury, and you got Whiteside. It's possible in the Eastern Conference that that's a playoff team. Even without the 10, it's just that 8 seed is always wide open in the East. It's possible. They're in the right direction. And for Michael Jordan's Hornets right now, that's the most important thing, is just trying to build the culture first. Build from the ground up. Do not try and just sign the star and expect it to happen. That's what the Knicks do every year, and it never works.
That's the type of team that would be like it would fall to the 7 seed like the last game of the season and then lose to the 10 seed though.
Exactly.
Like that's what I'm feeling.
That's also though the kind of team that would be like the 8 seed in the playoffs, and if it was 2K, they'd win the championship after sweeping the Lakers. It'd just be
that's true too.
Sorry, I hate 2K guys. The final contract, still 4 years, $85 million for Fred VanVleet, the point guard of the Toronto, or I guess Tampa Bay Raptors now. He's coming back. I mentioned earlier with the draft choice of Malachi Flynn. I think those two players are going to work closely together. But VanVleet now back for the long haul. There was, the idea that he could leave. Now it looks like Gasol and Ibaka are gone for sure. But Toronto just trying to maintain the pieces that won them that championship. Obviously no Kawhi anymore, but they're trying to keep that core together. Was VanVleet the right one to keep?
Yeah, homegrown star. Fans like him. He's that underdog type story. He deserved the money. I mean, his contract when he got drafted was dirt cheap because he was at least a late first rounder. I'm pretty sure. There you go. So shows you how much I remember about.
Maybe the best undrafted player ever? ?
I'm sure I'm blanking on people right now.
We'll look into that. Maybe have that as a hot take for next week episode.
Did Ron Baker get drafted?
We'll not bring that one up.
Poor Ron Baker getting clotheslined by AD and just
God, Ron Baker. Everyone's like, he's the next Kyle Korver. It's like, no, he just looks like the next Kyle Korver.
Who said Ron Baker's next Kyle Korver? He's like,
it was only because he literally looked exactly like a young Kyle Korver.
Yeah, he's blonde though.
Kyle Korver was blondish.
Oh, stop. You don't know anything about fashion
brown,
or hair.
Hey, I was blonde at a certain point. Just gonna throw that out there.
You know what's funny? People I've been occasionally seeing, they haven't seen me in months, go, wow, your hair's so dark now. I'm like, yeah, it gets blonde in the summer because of the sun. And they're like, no, it doesn't. I'm like, yes, it does. No one's ever noticed. But now, because no one's seen me in forever, it's like, oh, okay, that makes
maybe a little more
sense.
Love it. Yeah, no, we're staying safe, staying inside here. No sunlight for us. But Fred VanVleet.
Oh, wait, hold up. Timeout. Ben Wallace is an undrafted free agent. I'd like to make a claim that Ben Wallace.
Okay.
John Starks was an undrafted free agent.
Okay, so maybe not the best undrafted.
TJ McConnell was an undrafted free agent.
Okay, TJ is the best, guys. TJ McConnell. The TJ stands for Tiny Jesus. I'm telling you, it's the truth. It's not Timothy John.
It's not Timothy John.
But as this is our last thing, Fred VanVleet, Toronto, backup point guard, maybe starting shooting guard. Again, it's the shooting. He was such a big part of their championship team, especially with how incredibly hot he got from three, like the day after his son got born. Incredible stuff.
Well-deserved contract. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
Very well-deserved.
Defensively a little inefficient, but his offense does tend to make up for that more often than not.
It's
Toronto.
It's hard when he's 6 feet tall.
Exactly. Toronto said that was okay. We like VanVleet. We're going to keep him. But again, we're going to have to stop saying Toronto. We're going to have to go Tampa Bay as they might be the second best team in Florida at this point. I think they've already surpassed the Magic.
Probably, yeah. It's kind of a given.
Okay. Anything breaking from Woj?
Pat Connaughton had his deal restructured. Instead of a 2-year, $8 million contract, he gets 3 years, $16 million. So
not bad. Connaughton did not play much in the playoffs, but he's young. I like Pat Connaughton. He's a jammer. He can shoot a little bit.
He's a freak athlete, though.
Oh, yeah.
Man can jump.
Well, that looks like it. Not seeing anything from Woj at the moment. Just a lot of love for Fred VanVleet getting that bag. So with that is the free agent and draft update that we have for you. There is a large chance we come to you with another episode this week with all of the rest of the world of sports. We just wanted to designate this one for basketball as we love it, and it is prime time basketball news. So I hope you guys appreciated this update. We are going to be updating you with every other not draft day, free agent move, trade that leads up to the December 22nd start very soon. Players will be starting to report to camp in the next couple of days, actually, I believe. NBA, not a long off season. We don't get much time to take a break from the NBA, so we're designating a whole episode to it. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. We had a lot of fun tracking all this stuff, turning on the Woj notifications on Twitter, all that fun stuff. Again, hope you guys have a fantastic week, and we will be back whether later in this week or next week with another action-packed episode.
Yeah, we really wanted to get you guys all of the updates because there was a lot happening in basketball this past week, a lot that Robby and I were just struggling to keep track of, but a ton of fun. We always love keeping track of the NBA. If you love our basketball content, well, then this is probably the greatest thing in the world for you. If you're more interested in our football stuff, that maybe our baseball, have no fear. We are going to release an episode before Thanksgiving. We're going to give you our words. So if you're traveling for Thanksgiving, or maybe you're with your in-laws and hopefully social distance and you're just sick and tired of them and you want to take a break, give our podcast a listen. It's worthwhile. And but yeah, no, we'll give you the recap of week 11. We'll give you some picks on Twitter coming up. But take care, guys. Have a very safe holiday, and make sure you eat plenty of food. And go Sixers, go Heat, and go family.
Go away. All right, yeah. Have a good one, guys.
Take care.